you're not alone on the fact of going through this journey and the journey of figuring out self. And so I want to just remind listeners or anyone that might be struggling with their gender identity that, you're not alone. Your life is definitely worth it. The struggle can be very real for some people. So just stay strong, and know that, there are resources out there. There are people out there that care.
Hello, my LGBT cuties, and welcome back to another episode of A Jaded Gay. I'm Rob Lovelace, and today I'm a non-jaded gay because I've been doing some little house fixer-uppers around the house that just make me feel really capable of more than I thought I was. Nothing major, but for the past few weeks, we've gotten a lot of rain in Philly, and I was getting some puddles in my basement, which is not great. So I ended up getting some caulk, and I caulked around the outside of my house, down the stairs. Not perfect, definitely a little messier than intended. But then the other thing I did was, a while back over the holidays, I think I mentioned this, I kind of gave my kitchen a little uplift. I painted the counters to make them look like marble counters. And then my friend actually helped me. And by helped me, I mean he did it himself. Put up some like adhesive tiles to the backsplash because the older backsplash was ugly. But one of the parts of the adhesive backsplash kept coming off in one spot, and I kept reapplying it, but it was coming off. So I just ended up getting a little spackle and spackled that onto the wall. So nothing major, but like whenever I do these little home fixes, I just feel very proud of myself and like a property brother, which actually my friend's mom told me I look like a property brother, which, hey, I will take that compliment any day. I have a huge crush on Jonathan, so give me a call. But enough about my DIY crushes. Today we have a very special episode and a very special guest joining us. First guest of 2024 coming on the podcast today to discuss all things non-binary. So really important episode. Really excited to have this interview. But before we do, you know the drill. Let's pull the tarot. So we pulled a major arcana card for this episode, and that is the Hermit in reversed. So as a reminder, major arcana cards signal a major milestone in our journey. And the Hermit is number 9 in the major arcana, and in numerology, 9 is signifying that we're almost about to complete a cycle, but we're not quite there yet. And 9 also represents being alone or solitude. Now, normally the Hermit is encouraging us to spend time with ourselves and connect to our inner truth. But when we pull this card in reversed, it's telling us that we might be afraid to be alone and that we're refusing to look within ourselves. Or on the flip side, we may have been in isolation for too long and need to reach out to our support system. So really, it can kind of go either way depending on the circumstance you're in. And regardless of the circumstance, we definitely need to reflect and listen to ourselves to see what we need, whether it's that we need to address the reasons why we're afraid to be alone and kind of listen to our inner voice to really touch base with maybe some of those insecurities that are uncomfortable to confront, but necessary so we can move forward. Or on the flip side, that we need to reach out to our support system, our network, our chosen friends and family, so that way we can reemerge into society, never doubt the power of socialization and laughing with friends, even though that sometimes makes us step outside our comfort zone. So definitely something to think about as we go through this episode. But with that being said, let's bring on our guest. They are a public speaker, board member of Alder Health Services, and host of Caffeinated N Queer. Basically, they are a McMaster of all. Please welcome Travis McMaster. Hi, Travis.
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing dandy. It's a great day. I got my fresh cup of coffee, ready to go.
Awesome. Sounds like a good start to a Saturday morning.
Absolutely.
To kick it off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you identify, your pronouns, all that fun stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my pronouns are they, them. I identify as a non-binary person. I am here in Pennsylvania. I live in Franklin County, but originally born and raised in the Hanover, Pennsylvania area. So if you're familiar with Utz potato chips or Snyder's pretzels, they were basically in my backyard. And for many years, have kind of slowly just incrementally moved one county over at a time as my husband and I, where we live now. We've been here since 2022. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit about myself.
Awesome. And before we get into the episode, I like to ask all my guests today, are you an honorary jaded or non-jaded gay?
I think I want to go with non-jaded. I've really been trying to you know, I mean, over the years, like lead a more like optimistic, positive like mindset and lifestyle. So I'm gonna go with non jaded today.
I'm always glad to hear that. So, as you talked about at the beginning, you identify as non binary. Can you walk us through your self discovery of your non binary identity and your visibility importance awakening?
Yeah, so I'm actually gonna, I guess, flip the order, because the visibility awakening kind of hit me like a ton of bricks in 2017. So I was rolling through the Taco Bell drive-through as one does, right? And yeah, so I'm waiting for my order, and like I pay, and the young person who took my money was just like, "Oh, it's so cool to see somebody that looks like you in this area." And yes, it was in Hanover, right? So it's a smaller town for those who might not be familiar. Um, and obviously we are in a audio medium, so I guess just to kind of like tee it up, I have a face full of medals. I have like my lips pierced and my septum and my nose, and I have a lot of tattoos, so I'm very visually stimulating, to say the least. But this young person was just like just very warm and just so excited about it. I guess seeing somebody that looks the way that I do, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I got home and it was just like, holy smokes, like, I did my time in fast food in Hanover and realized at that point, like I could be the visibility I never had. Though we've moved incrementally through smaller towns, like there was no like push based because of like our careers, my husband and I, to, really kind of like move away to a bigger city or a metropolitan area. So that's when it was like, wait, like again, I could be that inspiration, and I've always kind of, I mean, since 2007, have been living out. But it was in that moment where I'm like, I could truly make a difference, and be the thing that I never had. Because I mean, I fully relate to being a young person who's like, I need to get out of here. Like there's nothing here for me. There's no community, and I like to believe in so many cases, like that's not true. Like there is community, you just got to find it. So when it comes to then like my identity, I came out in, when was that? 2007. I'd returned to school. So I was 21. I went back to the Art Institute of York, Pennsylvania. Rest in peace, because that school's not around anymore. But at that point, it was like I need to get myself figured out, and it was like, I'm gay, like period. Um, and I kind of went about my merry way, but there was just always like certain things that I was kind of drawn to, like whether aesthetics or just the thoughts, and not really like, I guess, feeling aligned to it. For example, like someone would be like, you're like a great man or whatever, or like I'm really proud of like the man you've like turned into, said by my parents. I would like I would just cringe inside. There was something about like that classification was like that just doesn't work for me. But on the flip side, doing certain things that I guess would be more feminine, whether it's painting your nails or having a purse, which by the way is very practical. I'd hear like, oh, are you trying to be a girl, or are you trying to be a woman? And it's like, no, I'm not. Like, I don't really, at both ends of the spectrum, right? Like, I just never really related to it, but for so long, I guess, didn't really have the language. It was just kind of, I don't want to say checked out of the community, but wasn't, I was like, I'm out. I'm this. It's LGBT, specifically at that time frame, right? And I was fine. I guess kind of complacent. But then it was like so my band Dead Bird Pie, we're not active currently, but from like 2017 to 2019, we really started, like we played a lot of gigs and whatnot, and I kind of, I guess not too dissimilar from how you hear some people say like how they've used drag to discover their identity. I in some ways used like my stage persona loosely to kind of work through that, where you're like pulling different outfits for to wear on stage. I was dabbling in different parts of the department store, right? Since then, like my nails have been painted every day for the most part, or like I more recently, have them this nice little easier sets, but like really start blending those gender specific things. but I did it kind of under the guise of rock and roll, right? Because I had my rock and roll band. But then it was, I think, fast forward to like 2018, 19, I followed Queer Tea, the blog. Of course, they're covering people like Alok Vadmenon, who's a non-binary person. So like starting to see people, hear the language. It started to kind of like be unboxed, if you will, for lack of better phrasing. And then around that time, I think like Sam Smith started identifying as non-binary, and like I just admittedly, like I didn't get it at first, but I was like, I just was so curious about it. I was like, I needed to learn more. Um, so then I guess to try to like not kind of belabor this point. Then through it was in 2021, I got a new job. I had opportunity to advance my career, so I took it. And for like this employer, there was just an awareness of inclusion, right? And there was a lot of different like different ERGs related to different communities, right? Like the Black community, Asian community, the LGBTQ plus community. They have 100% HRC rating, which for those I guess aren't familiar, it's the Human Rights Campaign. Their Work Equality Index score. So it just kind of says that they do a lot for the people as it relates to being supportive and having different things and being equitable towards the people. But it was in that space where I'm like, and I work from home as well, but it was nice to be able to have this space where I could like work through my identity and know that there wouldn't be ramifications or anything like that. I could like try things, figure things out. And, I picked up Alok's book, Beyond the Gender Binary, and that was really insightful and educational for me. And also listened to Samantha Allen's. It was I guess an audible audiobook, M to WTF 26 of the funniest moments from my transgender journey. And that was also kind of eye-opening for me, because again, I think it helps solidify like I am not on either ends of the spectrum or of the binary, right? I very much feel like I just float in the middle. And whether it's feminine, masculine, like sign me up. You know what I mean? So then it was a few months after that where I was like, I identify as a non-binary person, period. And it felt so good to say. Yeah. So it's kind of like my evolution of my identity.
One thing that really stood out to me from that was, I know you said, in 2007, you didn't necessarily have the language of non-binary, they, them. And I think, for me personally, in 2007, I was a closeted high school freshman. But even back then, I feel just general high level gay representation was still very stereotypical. What you saw in the media, what you heard talked about. And really, I mean, again, closeted, so I wasn't really looking for it necessarily. But I don't remember really ever hearing too much language, like you said, around non-binary, gender fluid, using they, them pronouns. I mean, I'm sure non-binary people have always existed, but it seems like more recently our language has become more inclusive, and there has been more visibility to really emphasize that non-binary people are part of the LGBTQ plus community. It's not just white, cisgender, gay men.
Yeah. 2007, I mean, it was so different then. Thinking back to it where, I guess from a visibility standpoint, I'm just so thankful for the one academic director that was there at the time. Shout out to Will. He was out, and it was just this great, real example. It like made it tangible for me, because of the fact that like it wasn't somebody in media or on a TV screen. It was somebody I actually knew who was successful. But yeah, I think from a language standpoint, I'm sure it was always there, but like we said, like people it wasn't being used, but it wasn't being talked about. And thankfully that I would say that's where there has been some positives in the technology changes, allowing people to create their own platforms and be more of a voice for the greater good.
So I believe you said it was around 2017 that you began using they, them pronouns. What kind of reception did you get from friends and family?
Oh, so actually, so my pronouns, that actually was a journey in and of itself. So 2017 was really when I like kind of came into the visibility, right? And the importance of being an out visible member of the LGBTQ plus community. When I came out and then in September 2021, from a pronoun standpoint, I was just like he, she, they is fine, whatever. I very much it was almost like this rebirth moment. It's not too dissimilar from like coming out as gay, where like there was this period of time where I had to feel comfortable with like what does that mean, and I just was kind of taking it one day at a time, and like if I had to like make a list of it, pronouns were kind of like down a little bit because I was like I'll worry about what people call me or how they refer to me once I feel like more confident like who I am. What does this look like? Exploring all those things. Um, and so a few months had gone by where I'm like, I think I need to like figure this out, and was really drawn to more gender neutral pronouns. So there was a period where like z, z, zir, I was using those because I thought, like they're gender neutral and not obviously like, they is as well, but at that time it just it just didn't resonate with me. And I don't know if it was more of a my punk rock spirit, like I need something that's more, I don't know, more gender neutral, as dumb as that sounds. Um, so I was kind of working with those, and I think with like Z and Ziz, there was like this nice blending of like specifically with Z, obviously it rhymes with he, so there's like that bit of a like masculine energy to it where the sizzle of the Z, it's not too dissimilar from like the sh or the S sound of a she. That was kind of like my thought process behind it. Fast forward then to last year, actually, I was out of town for work, and a coworker of mine, and it was new to this project team, actually referred to me using they. And that was the first time, and it was not in a way to be malicious or anything like that. It was just like that's how she said it. And like I heard it, and like I latched onto it so hard, where that's when I was like, I think like it just felt right, right? In terms of like hearing myself being referred to as they and them, etc. And I'm like, yeah, like this feels right. It doesn't feel forced the way I think I was trying to force other pronouns because I was just working through my identity. So shout out to Erica. Thank you so much for inadvertently like helping with that awakening. So telling friends and family, it's been a journey. Talking to like my husband about it, like that has been a journey, especially for him because like he's kind of always he's known me for so long. We've been together since 2007. Um, so he's like known me for so long up until 2021 as a man, and he him, and this gender journey. Um, he's been there. He's been rolling with it. He's been riding the wave. Uh, and he's been receptive to the feedback around working through it. And I too have my hope is that I will offer the grace because I know there's no malicious intent, right? It's about rebuilding that muscle memory, and I as well have to do the same thing. Like when I meet somebody and like get acclimated, because I think there's still a level of like having it ingrained that it's like he, she, and until the individual gets like enough exposure, right, to like work that through that muscle memory to make they so more regular to their brain. It just takes some energy. But I would say like the response has been like ebb and flow in terms of some people they get it immediately, it clicks. Other people they don't get it. It takes some explaining. So we just kind of take it one person at a time, one step at a time.
With that being said, would you mind going into a little bit more detail about in your relationship with your husband when you first began identifying more non-binary and using they them pronouns, how you brought that up in your, with your husband in your relationship, and how you started navigating that, maybe some challenges that came up, some, resolution, maybe advice you'd offer for people who are also, in a relationship but wanting to come out with their non-binary identity?
Yeah. So, so I have a tendency to wear my emotions on my sleeve. So when I have something like I really need to talk about, I struggle to keep that close to the chest until I'm ready to talk about it. So like when coming out to my husband as non-binary, we were actually on our way home from running errands, and he was and like I can remember like I had it like burned in my brain like being in the SUV that we had at the time and like driving and him being like, what was that? What did you want to talk to me about? Or like, did you want to talk to me about something? And I was just I froze and I was like, oh, I wasn't ready for this conversation right now. And I was like, well, obviously you can't thaw a chicken and not cook it, right? That's wasteful. So I wasn't gonna not have the conversation. So I was, this is who I am. This is how I now like this is how I identify, and this is kind of the journey I've been going on just to kind of figure all that out. And my husband's name is Jeremy. I'm just lazy, so I call him Jer. Um, he was just like, okay. Then that was kind of it. I mean, like in and of a nutshell, it was very much like that doesn't really change who you are. Like it changes obviously who you like are as how you identify, but like ultimately like you're still that same person. So that I mean that was a relief because honestly, like I had the fear. I'm like, well, I'm does that no longer make me the person that Jared married or signed up for? Or like, would he have that thought? Is it who knows? I had no idea how he was going to take it, so it was just a matter of ripping off that band-aid. Um, so I mean, and he's been very supportive, and I think it's just been an educational journey as well because he comes from that same camp of people at a certain time, like the language wasn't there, right? And so he's kind of crash coursing, if you will, for lack of better phrasing, on like trying to stay up to date and just understand all the things. Some of the challenges I think, or I think the physical part of it in terms of like aesthetic, right? And starting to wanting to explore how I dress, different garments, and getting kind of used to that. And for a while prior to that, I had already been using a purse. Again, super practical. Everyone should get into it. And like my nails were painted and whatnot. And so a challenge for me, and I guess this is gonna get real personal, real deep, real quick, was the insecurity of like still having that attraction between each other, right? Where at one point like we kind of had to have that difficult conversation where I kind of brought it up, my insecurities, and it was kind of brought to my attention that 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 was all in my head, basically. So I guess that lesson learned is like, though difficult conversations are very hard to have, they are definitely worth having. In terms of pronouns, to talk about pronouns, there was a period of time where I was letting it skate with anybody, with everybody, because I'm not really a confrontational person, right? Lover, not a fighter. Just kind of want to roll. I want to be cool with everybody. But then it got to a point where I'm like, I don't like hearing myself be referred to in these different ways. Like, this is who I am. I need to kind of put my foot down with that. So it was specifically with Jer. It was about finding that way that we could communicate where, I wasn't getting frustrated because I knew there was no malicious intent, but making sure that he knew I was coming up from a place of support, and not, it wasn't an attack. It wasn't like, oh, you screwed up my pronouns, like, grr. It was like, I hear that, just remember it's they, it's them, whatever. What really I think started to help though is when we did kind of come to terms of like how can I be a better assistant? So if I heard it, just kind of lean in and just do the reminder. But then last summer, I had the opportunity to participate on a call with the Trevor Project had hosted, and it was around identity, etc. And the person that led that call shared a very fantastic exercise, which I'm going to share here in terms of how to learn someone's pronouns, and I've applied it for myself too. But the idea is that for anyone you're struggling to learn those pronouns, you block in your calendar 5 minutes every day at the same time. So you can do it for at least 21 days because it takes 21 days to build the habit. But then you say 2 to 3 sentences about this person using essentially all the pronouns you're trying to wrangle and better understand. And so in doing that, you're obviously making yourself feel good because you're talking about someone that, you hopefully, have appreciation for, admiration, etc. So you're kind of putting out that positive energy, but then you're also working on building that muscle memory to, get used to that person's preferred method of being identified. And so, like, for example, I would say, like, if I had a non-binary friend named Max, I might say, Max is a fantastic drummer. They have amazing stick tricks. I always want them to be the drummer in my band. Um, yeah, so that's like, again, a small little example, and it takes like 30 seconds, right? So you do it every day. I've never asked Jer if he's implemented that, but like he's gotten so good with it, and does he sometimes slip? He does, but it's so. Like, even a good friend of ours actually commented it when we had dinner the other week. Like, he's so good about catching it. I mean, it's like if it happens once, and then like he's back on it. So it's cool to see the growth, and it's cool to see. Um, I guess it's just cool to have that support. So yeah, in terms of tips, have those difficult conversations. Um, I'd like to believe that it's about hearts, not parts, right? So like, and that's not to say everything, like, things could go left, of course, but you got to have these conversations. You've got to be able to give the person grace, and be able to differentiate maliciousness versus um, genuine hiccups. And then yeah, do that daily exercise. So put it in your calendars every day for 21 days at least.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really good idea to implement. And going off of that, for those people out there who are resistant to using inclusive pronouns and say,
oh, why does it matter what you say?
Why do pronouns matter so much?
Pronouns matter so much just because it's another form of respect, and just being like respectful and realizing like you're talking to a person. I mean, I guess in the simplest forms, it really does come down to just the respect factor. And believing people when they say like this is who they identify, or how they identify as, or who they are, uh, believing them. I think of all the different times where, just in jest, right? Just for fun, I would, for certain people, be like, hey, girl. And it's like, not even like, it was just like a fun, playful thing. And like, especially with men, it was like this backlash of like, oh, like I'm not a girl. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, I'm not saying you are. It's more like a, hey, dude. But in that moment, like, it's just so eye opening to me, because then it's like, my hope is that in that situation, it's like, but that's the example of like the backlash. Like, that individual does not prefer, that male individual, right? Does not identify as a girl, as a woman, does not want to be called a girl or a woman, does not want to be called a she or you or her. That individual is a man, identifies as a man, is male, and wants to use he, him. Great. And I want to be respectful of that. So I'm going to say like he, him. It's the same thing as it comes to like a non-binary person, or if it's a trans person that is transitioning and switching from she to her, or she to him, or vice versa. It's just being respectful. Like, be cool. It takes zero energy to be polite and nice to somebody. And I just, especially in like the climate, today's climate, the last several years of everything that's been going on, it feels like every other day I wonder to myself, like, whatever happened to like that golden rule and just being respectful? So yeah, it's probably a bit of a tangent on that one, but I feel like it's just a simple thing. It's just about being respectful. That's why they matter.
Absolutely. And you kind of touched upon this as well, talking about with your husband, if he has a slip up, he's good to catch it. But for somebody who accidentally misgenders someone, how should they proceed with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing with that is you can't make it about yourself as the person who may have fouled. And don't get defensive. That was the thing that I've experienced in my own journey in with some friends and even family and even my husband, where at first, when you try to correct them, they would get defensive, and it's like, this is an attack, right? Like, it's just like, acknowledge the hiccup and move on. So like, if you do realize that you've said the wrong pronoun, quickly apologize and keep the conversation, moving. You purposely correct yourself. Whether it's just like repeating whatever you said, but using the correct pronoun, or if you're continuing the conversation, you're still talking about that person, making sure you're using the correct pronoun. Don't make excuses again, and just, you got to work to improve. Um, Period. So, yeah, but I guess I really want to emphasize the, don't get defensive. Don't make it about you. It's about just being respectful. Realize that my hope is that everyone realizes that they're not perfect. We're all trying to, my hope, work to be better. And by being called out for your misgendering, it's about helping you be a better person. It's not about villainizing you. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And I think a lot of people confuse gender identity with sexual orientation. So can you kind of explain the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So gender identity is about your sense of self, right? And it's how individuals perceive themselves and what they want to call themselves, and it's like essentially the concept of who they are as that individual. Some people are male, some people are female, some people are neither, some people are a blend of both. And again, the sexual orientation is the heart. Gender identity is more the brain.
What does being non-binary mean to you in terms of embracing your identity?
At first, I kind of just was like, it means everything, but I feel like that's such a cop-out answer. Um, but I feel like it also kind of isn't, because it's a part of my core, right? It's part of my nucleus. It's like who I am. And being able to feel like I can identify as who I am, I know I'm going to be able to go out to the world being the best version of myself. Whether it's in my job or my relationships with my friends or family. So being able to have that language, I guess it just really does, it means everything, in a world that is like wrapped up in labels and identifications, knowing that, I don't have to necessarily be one thing or the other. I love, I can't believe it hasn't happened already. I usually make some type of food analogy because I love food. But like, so I make that point of like, as a person that loves a buffet moment, because I just love the options, I love the spread. As a non-binary person, I feel like it's very similar, where there's just so many options. There's no right or wrong. You can be this way, you can be that way, or you can go this way, you can go that way. And there's just this immense level of freedom that I feel like I have, because of like, this is how I identify. It's not men's jeans, women's sweaters. It's just jeans and sweaters. It's not a merce or a purse. It's just a purse. It feels freeing, and it just feels so simple.
And I love that analogy. That's a really good one. With that being said, too, like you said, there's no right or wrong. It just is, but what are some misconceptions people have about being non-binary or using they, them pronouns?
Yeah. So well, sure, there's more than like a lot that we could unpack. But the few things that kind of stand out for me is, I think as the identity, there is no right or wrong way. There is, I mean, and even I would say that kind of applies to like men and women, but like for non-binary people, this was something I struggled with and kind of had to work through, where I was like, oh, does this mean I now have to start wearing more dresses or more skirts? No, it doesn't. If I'm not drawn to it, I'm not going to wear it. So it doesn't necessarily mean one thing or the other, and so there's no so as the individual, there's no right or wrong way to exist. As for people who don't identify as non-binary, know that like, we are not confused. Like there's no confusion in terms of, being a man or a woman, because like, essentially like that's irrelevant. We are neither or we are both. So it goes back to that idea of like when people tell you who they are, believe them. Um, using they them. I feel like we always hear the whole people want to boil down the language. I just recently had this happen at a party with a friend. Um, who was like, "Oh no, it's not it's always plural." It's like, no, it's not. So then it had that language reminder of like how you might use they or them in a singular instance when talking about anybody or anything. Um, or like even like a thing, right? Like I might say, like for example, one of our dogs. Well, one in particular, Annabelle. She loves to lick the bowl, right? She needs all the flavor. So, you know, and where it sits, it can easily fall down the basement steps because she'll just like push it right around. So to say like, where did their bowl go? Like there's that example of it. I'm talking about one dog because it's Annabelle's bowl. But there's nothing plural about it. Um, so I would say, yeah, the plural aspect of it. Um, yeah, I think that covers the standout things for me.
I think it's interesting too how you touched upon, the misconception of the plurality of they them, because that was actually something. This was back in, I think, 2021. One of my family members, I don't even know how the conversation came up, but they said something like, oh, I feel bad using they them pronouns because it feels disrespectful, and it's plural. And I told them, I said, well, one, if somebody's telling you they want to be addressed as they them, then that's being respectful, that's not being disrespectful. But the other thing is too, I saw this on social media, which is how I had this example to give to this family member. But when the mail person drops off the mail, people always go, oh, they dropped off the mail today, or they left this in the mail today. They're using they in a singular sense there. So in that situation, it's okay. But then if somebody's saying, I want to be referred to with they, them pronouns, suddenly that's not okay because it's plural. So people already, throughout the English language have used they in a singular sense. But now they want to kind of be resistant to using they when you're looking the person in the face.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you don't even kind of think about how much you have done it until you're asked to do it specifically for an individual. To that point, you said family member, you said they, and I don't know who this person is, right? And so it was like, it was just like so seamless for you to say, I have this family member, they had this question, and I'm none the wiser because, again, I don't know who they are. It's fine. So like that's where I think I guess essentially the deprogramming of the thoughts that we all probably have from so many years of like burning in a person is a he, a person is a she, um, just in getting more relaxed to it and being exposed. That kind of feels like a full circle moment why visibility is so important, right? Like you're not going to get familiar with a person or type of person until you're like exposed and like sitting with that person, right? Having dialogue, having the conversation.
And at the beginning of the episode, you talked about visibility and how that helped you with realizing your non-binary identity. So why do you think LGBTQ plus visibility is so important, especially in smaller cities and towns? And then as a double parter to that, how can LGBTQ plus individuals find their community in these areas?
When it comes to visibility, it's so important. And I think I said this earlier, but like it just makes it so tangible, right? It makes it so real. And I think back to growing up and hearing like parents and my parents' friends talking about gay people, or like when The Birdcage came out, it was like this movie with this gay character, or Will and Grace, and Jack. Admittedly, I'm not like up on it. I haven't seen many episodes of the show, but like it's all those things where it's like, okay, it's on the TV. There's a level of fiction that kind of comes with it because it's on the TV, where when you're visible and you're out, you are tangible, you are real to that person. People can see, people know you exist, and it's so important, because I think it helps humanize people. Unfortunately, like so many who are swayed by certain sources of where they get their information from, and I think forget that like we are talking about real human beings, real people that exist, that have red blood, have a heart that can be broken, that have knees that can be scratched. And, this portion of their identity is like such a small part of that person. So, being able to show that we're just another group of people and we're just trying to live our lives, do well, have a good job, have a couple of dogs, etc. I think it's so important. And when it comes to specifically small towns and cities, I think there's this thought that some people have. I feel like I had it growing up. That is, a lot of small towns have a stigma over them, right? Where they're commonly more conservative, can be, I suppose. And as an LGBTQ plus person, you have to go to a big city, go to a major metropolitan area. But you know what? That's not the journey for everybody, and not everybody wants to do that. Some people like the ease and relaxation of a small town, and they want to be there, and good for them. They should be able to exist there. So by having people, yeah, and I think it comes back to this visibility and tangibility, where like having people be out in this small town, it very much, I think, helps put that stamp on like we are everywhere, like literally everywhere. And like every other type of person, we should be able to live wherever we want, you know? So, and I think it just helps speak volumes, especially then for younger folk, seeing people, having those examples of, okay, this is cool, like it's real again. And if that young person decides to move on to a big city, good for them. But if they choose to stay in that community, also good for them. Now, the back half of the question was about finding community. Obviously, it's a lot trickier when you live in a smaller town and there's not a gayborhood or like a area where is like the designated gay bar or lesbian bar or what have you. Um, so I think the first step is remembering that we are everywhere, and that in a smaller community, it just means it might be a little bit trickier. So you got to get creative with things. I think the best piece of advice I could really give about finding community at this point is paying attention to where you live, what pride organizations exist around where you live, and pay attention to what those organizations are doing beyond a pride festival. Right. So when we moved here to Franklin County, it's about an hour away from where we have always lived. We didn't know anybody. Of course, there was the concern of like conservative people being conservative, and but we had that where we used to live, and you kind of roll with it, keep safety in mind. But we came here, and it was so refreshing to see, like going to like Starbucks, they had a Pride Franklin County sticker on the door. I needed to find a new hairstylist because I'm not going to drive an hour to get my hair done because of my schedule and whatnot. So, I being able to go to that Pride Franklin County and see their list of vendors from Pride events, like, okay, well, this is a spot where these people are coming to Pride events for the businesses. My hope is that they are genuinely supportive of the community. In that case, that led me to a salon that also had one of those stickers on the door that very much is like, oh, we are accepting. And I'm, thrilled to say now one of our close friends, Justin, and his husband Brandon, like I met through going to the salon and having Brandon do my hair. So I think be mindful like what those organizations are doing, or ask if like are those organizations doing any type of like social mixers or meetups and whatnot. Again, Pride of Franklin County, this was just like 2 days ago, they had their monthly meetup, and this is the second time we've gone, and it's so lovely. I mean, like it brings such a smile to my face that in the last 2 months, Jared and I now have at least 6 new friends because of that, who are either in the community or like very much an ally of the community. And it's so refreshing to see that. So I would say leverage social media, or leveraging like those pride organizations maybe through their social medias to get connected. Um, I think, obviously you got to be safe. I always think I try to think about safety first because I don't want to just say use social media. Like, what does that even mean? Like, how do you connect with people? Especially because of the safety of it all. You know, I don't have any experience on any of the apps because I mean, I met my husband on MySpace and we've been together ever since then. So my hope is that maybe like through that you can at least like not necessarily like hook up by any means, but like maybe get a coffee, right? Or like see if there's a group of people or um I don't know. I guess I can probably stop rambling. I really feel like try to leverage those pride organizations. Like it has been just really good coming here, seeing what Pride of Franklin County has done to help build community. You know, to speak on what Chad and Corey are doing with Gettysburg in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, with Gettysburg Pride, where pardon me, you know, outside of the main Pride Fest, you know, they occasionally have different like theater events or meetups. You know, I guess like that's the thing. Like think to where it's as terrible as it might sound, stereotypically, where some certain people of the community flock to, you might find community there. I mean, theater is what it is. You know, plenty of people have gone to that are part of our community. You know, resonated with the theater community. So maybe that's your first in. You know, and I think of like the Rainbow Rose Center out of York and how they're like helping York, Pennsylvania, um, and Hanover as well. Like have different like whether it's different events, whether it's like meetups or they just had a what was it? Like all inclusive holiday bazaar. You know, allows it. I guess the point I'm trying to get at that I'm kind of belaboring is like see where these organizations are doing events where the whole idea is to draw and build community. And, you know, if you're not someone that likes to meet new people, well, get ready to practice to say, hello, this is my name. You know, like, what do y'all do for fun around here? Do you want to meet up for bowling, meet up for a movie, have some coffee, etc.? And I guess be ready to kind of throw yourself out there, but always just like have safety in the back of your mind, you know, just because some people are jerks.
And back in, I think, summer of 2022, we did an episode on ways to find your community. And like you said, there are a lot of online resources, like meetup.com. I think that's actually something since I've moved to Philly, I've been looking at. Again, I'm in a city, so there's more, you know, LGBTQ plus inclusive groups. But usually most towns still have something. And I think it's really important to, you know, if you can find one person who also identifies like yourself, somebody else who's in the gay community or somebody else who might be non-binary, odds are they have a network of friends, especially if you're in a place where you're newer and they're more established. They probably have a network of like-minded friends. So by befriending one person, you can unlock a whole new friend group as well, which is something, you know, I've been going through here in Philly. I, you know, became friends with somebody that I've known through Instagram for a few years and everything. But once I moved to Philly, I messaged him like, hey, I don't have friends. Do you want to hang out? And he's also a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I've met him and his boyfriend who are great. I've got to know their friends. So it's really helped me kind of by befriending one person, befriend a group of people. So that's kind of just a long-winded way of saying, you know, if you can find somebody that you can see yourself in, whether it's, you know, gender identity, sexual orientation wise, you know, you might be able to unlock a larger friend group through that person as well.
Yeah, I could just build on that. I think that there's a reminder to when it comes to finding community, take that one step at a time. You know, it's I would rather have like four really tight friends, right, than like you know, I'm very social and I love meeting people, but I think like when you're trying to build your community and whatnot, like it's if it's just you and one other person, and that's just you and one other person for however long, I think that's fine. You know, like let it be natural in its growth and know that there's like no rush to I guess make it like really have it like blow up and make it I think I'm falling apart with my answer. I guess the point I'm really trying to drive home is that um you know it might take some time. Be ready to be patient with it and I guess really appreciate like what you have as you slowly start to build the community. This is where I'm trying to get at. Because like even for us, I mean, when we moved here, we're very fortunate where we have two sets of neighbors who are well, I guess there's a few in a bias that like we are very supportive of the community and whatnot. The one is a member of the community, but that there's something about wanting to have friends who are in the community, right? So, when meeting Justin, it was like, like, oh, we should hang out sometime. Like, oh, you have a partner? Like, well, I have a partner too. I have a husband. Like, let's do this. To your point about like, you reached out to that individual and being like, hey, I'm in town. Like, I'm new here. Can we meet up? I feel like, and they were receptive to it, right? I feel like so often, like, that's one of the benefits that maybe we don't talk about enough in this community, where I think because at a certain point, I think it's safe to say we've all had to look for that community. It's almost like a rite of passage, right? As an LGBTQ plus person, like you got to come out, you got to figure yourself out, you got to come out. And then part of it is building the community. So to have anybody like reach out, I mean, if someone reach out to me and say like, oh, I identify this way or whatever, would you want to hang out or like have coffee? Like, absolutely. Like I'm always looking to expand my own LGBTQ plus community of friends. So I think it's great that it can go both ways as well.
Definitely. And like you said, it's, you want to take it as a slow process and really focus on the quality over quantity. But, in terms of talking about the importance of visibility, do you mind telling us some of your favorite non-binary or LGBTQ plus icons that you stan and, how they're helping to promote visibility around the non-binary community?
Yeah, so I feel like I have a list of people. When trying to like figure out who I would say in this, I realized all the people that I would call out comes with this energy of authenticity, right? Um, so know that that's where I'm starting at, because like that energy I resonate with. I use it as inspiration for myself, especially on like hard days where I just either want to stay in bed all day or just like whatever. So and these people have like their own style, their own aesthetic. But as for non-binary folk, Alok for sure. Again, Alok Vad Menon. Um, you know, uh, their book Gender Beyond the Gender Binary. I listen to that at least once a year. Like I just recently re-listened to it. It's the pocket collection. It's super quick. I'm an audiobook person, so there's so much knowledge there, and I'm so thankful for them really just being so open with who they are and advocating for the community as a whole. And yeah, I mean, like I think they're incredible. I got to meet them at Out and Equal last year. It was awesome. Like again, I'm just so appreciative of just their commitment to wanting to make everything better for everybody. Because honestly, like I know people say like gay rights or this rights, but like ultimately like, it's just rights. We just want equality. We want to be treated respectfully. So Alok for sure. Um, Jacob Kelly, who also performs as a non-binary drag queen, Trixie Valentine. So they are an inclusive sex educator entrepreneur with their own business, Mix Kelly Queer Education LLC. And they specifically specialize in teaching about diversity, equity, inclusion, so DEI, in the workspace, but they do different LGBTQIA plus trainings and sex education workshops. But between them as their self as an entrepreneur, but then them as Trixie Valentine, the non-binary drag queen, they're just such an inspiration. So Jacob lives in northeastern Pennsylvania. Um, I guess last year, Jacob and his twin were on was on a game show. Oh, the person from Glee. I'm failing on it. Anyway, the point is, I feel like Jacob is like just basically one of like the hardest working people that I know. I'm thankful to have the friendship that I have with them. They're inspiring to me. They've been so kind with their time where I've had questions over the last couple of years with different things, and they'll respond and whatnot. They're very much like a look. Like I feel like whether they say that to themselves every day when they wake up and look at themselves in the mirror, or they just know only how to be. Like they're always pushing for the positive change for people in the community, for people outside the community, and it's so inspiring, right? So Jacob Kelly for sure. Billy Porter, of course. Billy Porter is not non-binary, um, but Billy Porter just like pushes like being authentic, being true to oneself. I love Billy's music. Billy's last album, Black Mona Lisa, it's amazing. Like there's so much like inspiration and like power and like energy behind that. Um, but then I guess just to kind of throw out a few other quick names for people, Jonathan Van Ness from Queer Eye, Tabitha Coffee, who people might remember from Tabitha Salon Takeover or Tabitha Takes Over. She's incredible business person, leader, coach person, hairstylist. I would say Alaska Thunderfuck. People probably know Alaska from being on Drag Race and whatnot. I love Alaska's book. It was so insightful in gaining Alaska's perspective of like how Alaska identifies as a person and whatnot. That's also a book that I revisit quite often. Another Pennsylvanian. And then I would say like RuPaul, John Waters, just to name a few more. Again, all these people that I mentioned, it starts with the level of authenticity that they're putting out there, encouraging people to be authentic to themselves. And I almost forgot, I actually threw this on my Insta story. So I have on my wall an autographed picture of Dennis O'Hare from season 5 of American Horror Story when he played Liz Taylor. Um, I get that this is a fictional character that Dennis played, right? But I think for me, that character, like I look at that picture and was like, holy smokes, like that is like that character, that story, aesthetic, like is so much a part of like my inspiration. Where I was blown away that I see that picture every day because I'm sitting at my desk where I work, and coming here to record this interview with you today to talk about identity and all those things. It's like the picture just stood out to me, and I get again, it's a character on TV, but like it's still uh, it's still a source of inspiration, a source of I would say hope, right? So I wanted to shout out that out. So thank you, Dennis O'Hare, for being so awesome and citing that wonderful picture that I covet and love so much.
So I know we kind of tease this up front, but do you mind telling us more about your series, Caffeinated N Queer, and how your non-binary identity kind of inspired to create the series?
Yeah, so Caffeinated and Queer, it is a caffeine-fueled video series with an LGBTQ plus focus. And this series really just is about, it's somewhat like a love letter to our community. And it's also a selfish way for me to force myself to be more educated and informed of our community's history. Um, and then wanting to share it, right? So, in terms of like what started this series, prior for a few years, so that started in the pandemic, I did this like coffee video series called Caffeinated and Dangerous, where I was just like grabbing coffee and throwing stuff in it to see if it was a combination that worked. Pancake syrup is a good sweetener. Mixing cold brew coffee and tomato juice is terrible. And if you want to see my response to that, go look up that video. Um, I was delighted to find out from so many people that enjoyed the series, watched the series, whatever. But for myself, after 2 seasons, if you will, I was like, this is dumb. Like, I don't drink half this stuff. Like, I feel like I'm half wasting the product. And so I kind of started focused more on just drinking black coffee and trying different coffees. And then over the years, it's like, I have this thing, I love it. But, there's no value in it. And I had been, like I mentioned, like my band has been not active just because having some other focuses, focusing on career and whatnot, from at least personally speaking. And so around a few months ago, I had just did a few Caffeinated and Dangerous episodes because it was like, why not? Right? It was fun, but I'm like, what? And I did a poll, and people were like, yeah, like more of this. But I was just like, there's just no value in this, for me at least, right? Like outside of like being fun and entertaining, and encouraging people to go try coffee combinations or try different coffees. And so when I had so so I was just like, what do I want to do, right? And I've been looking for a new creative project, and I had a bit of an identity crisis as who I am outside of like the workplace, and like what do I want to do? Like the last few years have been trying to be more, I guess, in my own way of activism in terms of speaking at Pride events, being a public speaker, having presenting a talk and professionally styled. And I had the opportunity to go on a few podcasts a few months ago and talk about some movies with Cult Cinema Circle, Hey Jesse, and it was when I had the opportunity to be on the Minority Report in November. So shout out to Dewan, Carell, and Jarrell. They're great. Um, Actually, Carell, he's in Philadelphia as well. As a small tangent, but that week after it came out, I just I was so thankful, and we talked about it in that conversation. Where like for me, like I'm just so thankful to be in any space where people want to allow others to hear their stories or share lived experiences, right? Like I'm just so forever grateful for the friends that I have and the people who have shared those things. Where it really got me thinking, like maybe that's what I do with caffeinated and dangerous. But I'm like the name just didn't work, and I kid you not, like I was making coffee and it was like, wait, why not like caffeinated and queer? And at that point, it was just like off to the races where it's just like, holy smokes, like this could be it. I could do my little coffee thing where I have a drink. Maybe I'm trying something, but like being genuine, or it's not like Frankenstein drinks, but then talking about the community. And like I said, using it as a means to be more informed of our history. Because I mean, you turn on the news and every other state's banning books, gross. And being a resource or like kind of setting up my own platform where I can do what I want, meaning I can inform, educate, etc. But I can also, share and recommend, not too dissimilar from like how I am when I'm in person. My favorite activity is just sitting down with a group of people or one person over drinks, whether that's an alcohol drink or coffee, and just chatting. I mean, for hours, right? And so I was like, this could be it. And so I had this hope of, figuring out technology and being able to bring on guests, where that way, very similar, especially for like what Minority Report did and like what you're doing for me here in this interview, like sharing your space with me, being able to then set up my own space where then I can invite others in to share and kind of project them out to a different audience. So I think as it relates to identity, it's more, I think, bigger to me. It's about community and just um, having another platform for our community to be a source of education, information, recommendations, a lot of the shins.
That's awesome. I love the work that you're doing on that, especially around the LGBTQ plus history, because I think there is so much history, but so many of us within our own community don't even know because it wasn't taught to us. And, a lot of it's been pushed down by patriarchal society. It hasn't been what people wanted to promote or learn about, but a lot of the issues, a lot of the history that's gone on in the past is what has led us to today. And honestly, history repeats itself. And so it's really important to be in touch with those things so that we don't become complacent as a community and that we continue to speak up and raise our voices.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important. I mean, I would say like, as a punk rock kid, as a rock and roll kid, hearing about book bannings like gross. I'm not for that, but I very much think of like how much I've had to grow, and I, as a person where I kind of had to how do I want to say it, where I feel like I could have grew a lot faster and a lot easier if there was certain pieces of education that were there a lot earlier. I one memory that sticks out in my brain is when, and this is many years ago, like I had one understanding of what drag was, right? Mostly based off of this first few seasons of Drag Race. So when Carmen Carrera, called out the show for not being more inclusive, I just remember thinking like I didn't get it at the time. And it was like I didn't understand the point that Carmen was making. And so, a little bit of time passes and then like I finally watch Paris is Burning and I start Googling and I start this and it's like, holy smokes, like there's so much history. I mean, of course, like some of it you gotta look for. It takes a little harder to to find, but it's like, my goodness, how much more would we be better off if we had more exposure to said history, especially given like the impact that it has had on everything. I think like even with just language, right? Like black and brown people in the New York ball scene doing like in ball culture and like the language that came from that. Um, Now some like random straight white woman is saying things like that slays or whatever, and it's like you have no concept of like where it came from. So like that's where for me it's just like it needs to be brought up. It needs to be shared. Um, because if again, as a pushback, if people are gonna like ban books, well then I'm gonna talk about it, and like I want to do my whatever I can to help be a source of education and information.
I really loved your first episode because it was kind of a back to basics moment, which was very important, which kind of just went over what the full LGBTQI plus acronym was and what all the letters stood for. Because I think a lot of us in the community, one, don't even realize how many letters are within that acronym, and two, what the letters actually stand for. So would you mind walking us through that and, giving the meanings of all the letters to be fully inclusive of the whole acronym?
Yeah, so LGBTQIA2F, there's so many iterations, right, of the initialism. So um, I'm just gonna kind of pull like what I did from that episode. So L is lesbian, right? And so a lesbian is a woman who is emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to other women. And women and non-binary people may use this term to describe themselves. G stands for gay, and this is a person who is emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to members of the same gender. And men, women, and non-binary people may use this term to describe themselves. B stands for bisexual, and commonly you'll hear it as just bi or bi plus, but this term refers to the person who is emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to more than one gender, not necessarily simultaneously, in the same way, or to the same degree. And so, like a bi person could have attraction to genders that are similar or different from their own. T is transgender, so that, it's often shortened to just trans, which is the Latin prefix for on a different side as. And the term describes a person whose gender identity does not necessarily match their assigned sex at birth. So trans is often considered more inclusive than transgender because then it's accounting for terms like transgender, transsexual, transmasc, transfemme. But this term can also be used to describe groups of people who transcend conventional expectations of gender identity or expression, such as groups, but are not limited to, of course, people who identify as transsexual, gender queer, gender variant, gender diverse, non-binary, or androgynous. And it's important to remember that being transgender does not imply a specific sexual orientation. Okay, so therefore, transgender people may identify as straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc. Now, depending on the version of the initialism that you might see, sometimes there are times where you see the Q twice. So there's two different meanings. I would say commonly, if you're seeing Q once, it's fair to assume that the Q stands for queer. So that's, of course, a term that's often used to express the spectrum of identities and orientations that are counter to the mainstream. And it's basically like a catch-all term, right? To include as many people who do not identify exclusively as straight, or folks that may be non-binary or that are gender expansive in some way. And I guess I do want to call out the fact that queer is a term that has been used as a slur, and that there are parts of the community that have reclaimed it. I specifically am a person who has reclaimed it. Again, like I have a whole series named after it. But I do understand that why some people could not reclaim that and are not a fan of the term. So Q could also stand for questioning, right? So that basically it's a way to describe people who are in the process of discovering or exploring their sexual orientation or gender identity, or gender expression, or any kind of those combos. And it's important to remember that, a questioning person does not implicitly imply that an individual is lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer. So moving along, because we've got a bunch more letters. So I is intersex, right? So this is a term that's used to refer to people who are biologically between the medically expected definitions of male and female. And this can be through variations in hormones or chromosomes or internal or external genitalia, and any combination of or all primary and or secondary sex characteristics. Right. So an intersex person can be any gender identity, any sexual orientation, and any romantic orientation. And the medical terms hermaphrodite and pseudo-hermaphrodite were previously used, but these terms are now considered neither acceptable nor scientifically accurate. So let's scratch those from our vocabulary. A stands for asexual, which is often shortened to ace. And asexual refers to a complete or partial lack of sexual attraction or lack of interest in sexual activity with others. Each asexual person experiences relationships, attraction, and arousal differently. And asexuality is a sexual orientation that does not necessarily define sexual behaviors. Also, asexuality is, in and of itself, its own spectrum. And so an ace person, can have varying ways that they experience their relationships, attraction, and arousal. The P, and I don't think I may have missed the P when I gave one of the other initialisms, but P stands for pansexual. So a pansexual person is a person who has the potential for emotionally romantic or sexual attraction to people of any gender, though not necessarily simultaneously in the same way or to the same degree. And depending on the individual person, bisexuality and pansexuality, they may not be mutually exclusive, or they may be. And actually, around the time I discovered, Rob, your show, you had the guest on that talked about being bisexual. And I recall that individual specifically being like, they are not mutually exclusive. And it was one of those moments where it was so eye-opening for me to be able to hear that person share their lived experience. So thank you to that person for sharing. And of course, thank you for having the platform to share, to give them the opportunity to share that, because I found that very insightful.
I think that was the episode about bi erasure with Sam McLean.
Yep, that's the one. Yeah, fantastic episode. Those who are listening to this, go check out that episode for sure. And then two more things. So 2S or 2 is, you might see, it stands for two spirit, and two spirit is an umbrella. Two spirit is an umbrella term used within some Native American indigenous cultures, used to refer to a person who identifies as having both male and female essence or spirit. And the term can encompass sexual, cultural, gender, or spiritual identities. And though this shouldn't have to be said, I said it on my episode and I'm going to say it here. Non-indigenous people should not use this term as a way to describe themselves. Like two spirit, 2S, it's for indigenous folk. Be respectful. And then lastly is the plus sign. So the plus is used to encompass basically those identities that are not being used in whatever version of the initialism that you might be seeing, hearing, reading. So that you might hear LGBT plus, LGBTQ plus, LGBTQIA plus. So the plus is a way to, again, say, we know it's more than just what we've already announced, and we're trying to be inclusive. Because if I could just take a few other minutes just to share, when it comes to the initialism, you'll see across the board. Some people say LGBTQ, LGBTQIA. Ultimately, I would encourage you to find the one that works for you. To say LGBTQI or LGBTQQIA 2SP, I'm struggling here in this moment trying to say it. It's just messy and it just sounds disrespectful and gross. So, to be able to say LGBTQ plus and say it smoothly, keep that in mind as you're figuring out how you when you're speaking of the community, referring to the community. So keep that plus there. Personally, I think I love LGBTQ plus and LGBTQIA plus, but Yeah. So that's the initialism.
Super informative. Thank you for walking us through that. That actually tied back to something I meant to ask earlier on relating to gender identity. You know, there's terms like non-binary, gender queer, gender fluid. I guess, you know, what do each of those mean, and is there a preferred word to use or a more politically correct word to use? Like, is non-binary more kind of like a blanket term, and then gender fluid, gender queer are more specific, or is there, you know, is it really up to the person which word they like to use?
Yeah, I would say it's probably more up to the individual person. Um, I don't know if there's necessarily a right or wrong. I feel like I've heard non-binary be used as that umbrella term for, gender expansive, gender queer. Um, but I would say when in doubt, like use the language that the person you're talking about has used to identify themselves.
Okay, sounds good. And then, kind of pivoting from what we talked about, adding to your impressive list on your resume, you're also a board member of Alder Health Services. So, can you tell us more about the great work they do and how you got involved?
Absolutely. Love Alder Health Services. So I joined the board back in June of last year. Alder is based out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and they work to improve the health and well-being of individuals living with HIV or AIDS and members of the LGBTQ plus communities, specifically in South Central Pennsylvania, by providing an inclusive and affirming environment that empowers, the people they serve. They do serve, it's about a 10, actually, it is a 10 county region of Pennsylvania. And so, in terms of services, they provide, again, that non judgmental environment for HIV and STI testing. They can help HIV positive individuals with their case management and support. They can help patients access gender affirming primary medical care services. And you don't have to even have HIV or AIDS or be someone that is looking for gender affirming care. Like you can have primary care services, right? Like, so for example, like my husband and I could go there as our regular family physician if we wanted to. Um, Admittedly, given that its proximity to where I live is why I don't go there. Um, but so there's a lot of different like health related things that they do. They also have a wellness center and, have held different yoga classes from time to time. I love it. So I got actually involved through the organization. I had the opportunity to do some volunteer work through them through my employer's annual day of volunteerism. And I saw a little bit behind the scenes. Like I'm also a LGBTQIA like ERG or BRG, which stands for Employee Resource Group or Business Resource Group leader where I work. And so for this day of volunteerism, I specifically was on a mission, and there was an ask to find an LGBTQ plus org. So I knew where I was going, right? Like I knew of Alder for many years. And again, from a proximity where I lived, I did not leverage them because I just wasn't informed enough of like all they had to offer. Another thing they have is an on-site pharmacy. But I didn't know about all their care options at the time. So having this opportunity to volunteer with them, I fell in love. The CEO, Rosemary, she that first time, because I've now had the opportunity to volunteer twice in this day of volunteerism, but back in 2022, I think I may have said the date incorrectly the first time, but yeah, that first time in 2022, Rosemary sent us all with like the bag with all the pamphlets of all the services and all the things they do. And I'm a early riser thanks to our oldest beagle, who is very strict about his food schedule. So that next morning, it's 5 a.m. The beagles are chowing down on their food, and I'm just reading through all this collateral, and honestly, like kind of coming to tears because I just had no idea this great organization was essentially in my own backyard, and couldn't help but think back to 2007 when I was coming out, the health scare that I had, dealing with the doctors that I'm like, I'm barely comfortable saying that I'm gay, and now I got to tell these doctors why I think I have this illness or why I'm sick and whatnot, and like everything about this sucks. So that's where I was just like, oh my goodness, like people need to know about this. So when, I was asked about joining, it was like, what an honor. I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to help support this organization, bring awareness to it. They do great work, trying to support again people with HIV or AIDS and the LGBTQ plus community. So yeah, check them out.
Awesome. That's great work you're doing. I mean, it's definitely much needed in the community to have those inclusive spaces, especially in healthcare. As we're kind of coming towards the end of this episode, what advice would you give to someone who may be struggling with their gender identity?
Yeah. So I guess I first would say I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. My own little safety net. These are just my opinions and suggestions. That's such a loaded question, though, from where I sit, because I feel like it really depends on the individual that we're talking about, because factors come into play, like safety, of course. Are they a young person? Are they an older person? So if I could speak more broadly, or as broad as I possibly can, I would encourage the person to find someone they can trust, especially, if they're a young person, find an adult that they can trust, that they can just kind of talk through. And I specifically want to call out young people because I understand the reality of the safety. Like, you might not be safe at home. You might not be, it's hard to find areas of safety. But that's where I would encourage those people. And again, people of all ages, check out translifeline.org or the Trevor Project, specifically because both of those organizations have hotlines you can call to talk to somebody if you feel like you have nobody that you feel like you can talk to. And those websites also have really good resources to help you kind of work through that. Yeah, and I would also encourage individuals to look up other LGBTQ plus organizations, like the LGBT Center. There's a lot of them sprinkled throughout the country, or PFLAG, for example. Again, these nonprofits have a lot of different chapters that you can kind of leverage for resources, to pool. And, I guess I would remind them, regardless of the age, and I know I said earlier, like you might not have anybody and you're struggling to find somebody to talk to, but it's so important to remember that, like, the journey you're going through, while it is exclusive to you and your lived experience, you're not alone on the fact of going through this journey and the journey of figuring out self. And so I want to just remind listeners, or anyone that might be struggling with their gender identity, that you're not alone. Your life is definitely worth it. I don't want to, I guess, get too dark on this, but I feel like it needs to be said because, like, the struggle can be very real for some people. I can't imagine what it would be like as a young person trying to live knowing they are like a trans individual, for example, and just like the weight of the world, especially given the way it is now. So just stay strong, and know that, there are resources out there. There are people out there that care. Again, translifeline.org, Trevor Project. I would also like to say, remember, you're not in competition with anyone, and that this is your journey. Like, it's personal. So do your best not to compare yourself. Like with so many things in life, I feel like we get in competition with each other unintentionally. Working through your gender identity, it's no different. It is exclusive to you. It can be whatever it is to you. So don't get caught up on thinking you're not enough because you're not this or that. From like if I could just kind of throw in some like fun tips, if you're struggling, I love a look, I love a fashion moment, I love style, all those things. So, clothing can be expensive. So I would encourage you, look to see if there's organizations in your area. For example, Alder Health does this. They have a clothing market where people can donate slightly used, like, this isn't like thrift store or like heavily, heavily beaten up clothing. This is nice stuff, that are being donated to some of these organizations where they have these clothing markets where if you are going through a gender identity, or you're navigating your gender identity and you don't have the means to, like, buy the clothes to help you kind of work through that, see if there's organizations that have clothing markets. I know some different events, and different nonprofits occasionally have like clothing markets as well. I think of the Rainbow Rose Center specifically held one at a conference, the Keystone Conference. And a lot of times those are it's donated, so they're just giving it away. So those are a way to kind of help figure yourself out without incurring cost. But from a safety and comfort, and I do this a lot. I'll shop online. I have found I specifically shop at like one department store because I can order from there, bring it to my house, try it on, see if it works. And if I don't like it, I can then go to that department store and return it. So whether you get free returns or like, don't spend money on the returns, that's a fun way to kind of like work through the clothes. I should have kept a running list that summer of 2021 for the amount of heels that I bought on Amazon and would then, like it would show up, I would try it on, and within minutes I was like, this isn't going to work. Let's return it. And then I'm, off to UPS or wherever to send it back. So I would say, yeah, the important stuff at the front is if you need like the help from like the figuring it out, but then also the fun things around the clothing. I think I covered it.
And connecting it back to the tarot, the Hermit in reverse can indicate two things. Either one, that we're afraid to spend time alone with ourselves, or that we're afraid to look inward, or two, we've been spending too much time in isolation and it's time to reach out. And for today's episode, I really think it reflects the latter. I think this card is telling us maybe for too long we've kept ourselves, our authentic selves, our identities in isolation for fear of being open. And now it's time to really reach out and speak up and show our true selves to create that sense of visibility in whatever community we're in, whether we're in a large city or a small town, because we need to know we're not alone. And again, obviously, easier said than done, and always prioritize your safety. And again, maybe this isn't across the board. We do really need to listen to our boundaries and what feels safe to us, but really try to find opportunities to speak up and to show your authentic self and to try to find your own community and help create the visibility you also want to seek. Travis, thank you for coming on today. This was such an important conversation. Again, love the work you're doing with Alder Health Services and Caffeinated N Queer, having these important conversations and providing resources for audiences out there, and really emphasizing the point that, they're not alone. So kind of wrapping up the episode, can you plug all the things and tell everyone where they can connect with you on social media?
Yeah. Well, first, before I do that, Rob, thank you so much. I mean, genuinely, thank you so much for allowing me here to come on. I learned about your podcast through someone else that I follow on Instagram and just fell in love with what you're doing. I thought like what you do is so different in terms of like the different topics. I was blowing up your DMs a few times being like, oh, listen to this episode or that episode. So I love the creativity that you've had in like your topics in terms of the things that you've been covering, from like the horror episode to the different guests that you've had to like the playing, like the episode around like actors and whatnot playing gay versus like actually hiring people in the community. So really excited for your new season to kick off. So again, thank you so much. Love the work that you're doing. So for myself, so you can follow Caffeinated N Queer, and that's like the letter N. So Caffeinated, the letter N Queer, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Yep, that's where those are at. And I will say, yes, the N is inspired by like Guns N' Roses, because there's got to be a punk rock element to it, right? You can follow me at it's More Than Mindless. Yeah, More Than Mindless without the A. So MoreThanMindless. But you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd if you have any interest to see what movies I love, like, or don't like. I think I'm on TikTok there. And then for Alder Health Services, on Instagram, they're at Alder Health Services. Specifically for Facebook, you can find them at just Alder Health. Alder Health's website is alderhealth.org. And I think that covers it for now. So, and I guess I'll say my band, if you're interested in looking up Dead Bird Pie, you can find Dead Bird Pie on Instagram. Again, we're not currently active, but we have music on Apple Music and Spotify and all those places. So you can hear my raspy voice through the singing our songs.
And I'll be including all this in the show notes or in the episode description. So be sure to check that all out. For our podcast, you know the drill. You can follow the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, SoundCloud, and YouTube at A Jaded Gay Pod. You can follow me personally, Rob Lovelace, on Instagram at Rob_Lovelace. Any questions or feedback, feel free to email me, rob@ajadedgay.com. Check out the website at ajadedgay.com for more information on episodes, resources, and guest information. Also, if you're feeling generous, you can join Patreon for as little as $1 a month for ad-free episodes a day early, or doing a one-time donation on Buy Me a Coffee at A Jaded Gay Pod. And remember, every day is all we have, so you got to make your own happiness. Bye.